quick thank you. I'm delighted to be here, but I'm not that Ron Chapman who was on your radio for so many years. However, there is a woman here in Dallas-Fort Worth from a book signing I did in Lubbock, Texas a few years ago who thinks she has his signature because I personalized something for her and I couldn't talk her out of thinking I was that guy. So I'm not that guy, I'm this guy, the guy that you just referred to. And I talk in circles. Actually, not true. So they didn't tell me that you all should actually be called the Spiritual Dancing Center. I didn't know that part. But I have a story to tell you. It's a story about a woman named Carrie. I got involved with Carrie a number of years ago, and I want to correct your hearing. When you heard me say involved, you made some assumptions. Yeah. Not that kind of involved. She came to me as a teacher who does spiritual healing work because she was in a very, very difficult place. So we might call that the work, the inner work. And she came to me because she had just been riffed out of a 27-year marriage, never saw it coming. Literally, she was cast aside with no resources. She had a daughter who was early adolescence, didn't know how she was going to manage. And she was devastated, absolutely devastated. She also happened to be in recovery, which there are undoubtedly some of you in the room, and I am too. Part of my foundation is 12-step recovery, which is really quite miraculous, 33 years ago. But that's not really why I'm talking to you about Carrie. Because somebody asked me, do you only do this in recovery world, or do you only do this in unity? Or it's like, no, I do this everywhere, because there's only one practice. There's only one practice. So Carrie came to me devastated, and she does what all of us do. Carrie came to me expecting to be made whole. I was going to sprinkle fairy dust on her, because after all, I'm a teacher, so I was going to do some spiritual juju, and the spiritual juju was going to make her well. We had a long conversation, the first of many long conversations, during which time she managed to get in and out of a succession of further relationships, each of which was devastating in its own way. And she was bewildered because she's a beautiful woman. If you met her, you would love her. And yet, instance after instance after instance after instance of damaging situations. So finally, beside herself, she took a deep breath and said, Ron, I think there's something we haven't been doing. And I said, okay, lay it on me. Because one of my teachers told me, till they ask, don't go there. Till they want it, don't try to teach it. I said, okay, talk to me. She goes, something's broken inside me. And I said, yeah. Now we're ready to do the work. Let's talk about how you're broken on the inside. Because the story on the outside was somehow or another, she kept finding men to treat her like a broken woman. Now, I don't intend to call her a victim. That is not what I'm saying. Please don't mishear me. She was doing the only thing she knew how to do. And in her language, Carrie was showing up as an object. Now, in order to understand that objectification, you have to go all the way back to her childhood, where she grew up in a male-dominated culture. It happened to be Hispanic. Happens in all kinds of places. By the way, I love talking about this because we're in an era where that stuff has got to stop, period. So I had a lot of affinity for what she was doing. But what happened was she was sexualized. That doesn't mean she was incested. That means she was sexualized. She was treated as a sexual object. She had photos of herself at the earliest ages wearing short skirts because her daddy and her brothers praised her for her legs. When she began to have curves, they praised her for her curves. She was rewarded for dancing. She was rewarded for being an object. So not surprisingly, Carrie's only identity was as an object. She had no other self. There was nothing else there. Because what happens is within the first 7 years of our lives, I do a whole lot of work in public health. If you didn't know this, in the first 7 years of our lives, we are imprinted. A lot of damage can be done. A lot of healing can be promoted. Don't know. In her case, she had been objectified. So the only thing she knew was to be an object. That meant she'd not gotten a successful education because, of course, her currency was objectification. Why have an education? Her objectification was objectification. She was a sexual object. She was a object for men, her only identity. Couldn't find work because she never had to work, because she'd always been taken care of, because she was some guy's object. So she's left with no income. She's got a kid. She's been cut off from all her resources. She can't find a guy to pick her up and carry her through this. So she is, as we like to say, screwed. Yeah. She has no place to turn but finally do the one thing she did not want to do, which was to look inside and go into what we call the dark space, shadow work. So here's why this is relevant to you. I promise I'll come back to Carrie. Here's why this is relevant. If we walk the world with an identity that is false, disowned, shadowed, broken, it's actually the only prayer we ever utter is that. She walks the world, Carrie does, saying, I'm an object, treat me like an object. And by golly, there are plenty of people who will dance that dance. And she doesn't know she's doing it. She is innocent. It is not her fault. The Italians have a great word in art. Ann and I did a lot of art. Wandered the city looking at art the past 2 days. Chiaroscuro, which means darkness and light. And the spiritualist Gurdjieff, Russian Armenian spiritualist, said the reason that's so valuable is because it is darkness and light, contrastly, which brings things into form. No contrast, no form. There's not a life on earth without contrast. Arlo Guthrie says it this way: you can't have a light without a dark to stick it in. You can't have a light without a dark to stick it in. So whether you're struggling with prosperity, I'm sure some of you do, because it happens a lot. Whether you're struggling with finding your proper purpose in the world, that's a challenge we find all the time, a career or whatever. Whether you're struggling with trying to find your spiritual lane, your perfect partner, your soulmate, which, by the way, if you didn't know this, soulmate doesn't mean that lovely, wonderful person who does everything you like. It means they're going to poke at everything in you that needs attention. You can look that one up. So Carrie's story is our story, because every single one of us got an imprint. And in some cases, that imprint is pretty devastating. So for example, for 20 plus years, I've been listening to people in New Thought try and think their way into prosperity despite a poverty consciousness. It doesn't work. Jesus called this whitewashing the sepulcher. Now, if you don't know that story, Jesus was commenting about a place where they keep dead bodies, which stink. What he meant when he said whitewash the sepulcher is you can't put whitewash over that and have them stop stinking. So Carrie couldn't nice her way or think her way or positivize her way into doing away with the stink, the rot within her, which is awful language, but she'd been damaged. And most of us avoid that forever. Jesus also said this, one of my favorite lines: you can't put new wine into old wineskins because the old wineskin spoils the new wine. So unless we deal with the old wineskin, the darkness, the shadow stuff that Carl Jung said we spend lifetimes avoiding, there's no space for the new. So you can't get prosperity into a poverty consciousness. You have to deal with the poverty consciousness. Then the light finds a way in. And the challenge for us is we love bypassing. You all know the phrase bypassing? Yeah, bypassing is that thing we do to avoid looking at the dark stuff, because the dark stuff isn't pleasant. We do it in all kinds of ways. We do positive mantras. We do affirmations. Joel Goldsmith said, every time you say, I believe in my own prosperity, you are confirming your poverty. Because people who are in prosperity don't have to say, I am prosperous. Only a person who believes in poverty, only a person who believes that they need a man like Carrie to fix her life, that's the problem. We meditate our way into bypassing, because lots of us use meditation to find pleasant feeling places. The Buddhists, one of the places that I have some interesting background on, I'm not a Buddhist, but it's interesting background, Pema Chodron. Do you all know Pema Chodron? Pema's probably the best Buddhist teacher, certainly in the West now. Pema says the point of this work, the point of meditation, is to lean into the sharp points. To lean into the sharp points. The purpose of these practices isn't just to feel better. It's to puncture the stuff that is holding us back. And nobody wants to do that. Why would I do that when I can positivize myself? Except it doesn't work. It doesn't work. God bless us, it doesn't work. I know people, including myself, who have decades of self-delusion. And Carl Jung, the great psychologist, said it so very well. We avoid the shadows at our peril. Because that, exactly as he said, that's where the growth is. So the healing process is to actually go to the places that are broken, injured, painful, tender, and work with those through all kinds of forms, including some of the ones you already know, but we shift our focus. So for example, a tool I've been taught, I'll just give you an illustration of this. In Buddhist settings, lots of people use meditation to find that nice, peaceful place. And I'm not against peaceful places. I just know that the solution isn't there. There's another practice, not practiced by many, who use meditation to lean into the most uncomfortable spots within them. Because they know that the leaning in produces movement, and it's the movement, it's the contrast, which allows us to see something other than what we're seeing. And I want to repeat it, and it is the last thing any of us want to do. I was telling Lee and Jean, who've been marvelous hosts, that I told a mentor some years ago that I was going to write a book. And the intro was going to say, if you're looking for 5 easy steps to find your soulmate, to lose 50 pounds, and be a millionaire by the end of this year, please take this book back to your bookseller. You are going to be sadly disappointed. And Sam said, oh, that's great. You're going to sell 3 books, one to me and one to each of your daughters, because nobody wants that book. I mean, the whole culture is supporting our bypassing. Of course it would, because we don't want to go there. Because it's not pleasant, especially when we begin to see the parts within us that don't look so good. And if you don't know you have those, you haven't looked. We all have them. In my case, I was having a couple of good conversations with Lee about this. I've been working for years to get over my own self-importance. Trying to be self-important is a huge spiritual impediment for me. And it may take this lifetime to get over it. Ironically, I speak in front of groups, right? And they stare at me like, this guy's pretty wise, or well, maybe you're thinking I'm an idiot. That's okay too. Actually, one of my mentors said the fastest way to get over being spiritually important is to make an ass of yourself as promptly as possible, which I have perfected. I am extraordinarily good at that. Now, some of you are thinking this sounds kind of uncomfortable. It sounds kind of difficult. It sounds like it might take a while. And the answer is it does. The reason why masters typically in any discipline are decade or more in the making is because you don't become a master in short order. You don't deconstruct the belief system quickly. It doesn't go that way. Mainly, and I'm going to go back to Carrie for a moment, because her question to me was, well, if I'm not somebody's object, and if finding the guy is not my solution, then who am I? And your egos will do anything to avoid that question because it feels like the extinction of the ego. The ego will hold on to a devastating self-belief system, a set of old ideas, as long as it thinks it's working right up until the moment that you crash like Carrie did. So in fact, in the recovery world, we talk about the value of the bottom because we talk about this with a few in my little circle, because most of us don't see the light till we have felt the heat. Most of us don't see the light till we felt the heat. Back to contrast. The difficulties, the darkness, the challenges, the pain, the tenderness is part of the whole. You can't exclude it. It has to be incorporated. We have to engage it because that's where the magic happens. That doesn't mean we don't do positivizing stuff. It means we deal with the old wineskin so there's room for new wine. We work with these blockages within ourselves, the blocks in the eye, Jesus might have called them, because it creates a space for something new to find us. Here's the miracle of it. You don't have to find the light. The light pours in when the darkness diminishes. Ego doesn't like that either, because I want to believe I'm my solution. I want to believe I got this deal, because I'm like a powerful, incredibly talented human being, except I'm in my own blinders. That doesn't mean there isn't power. It means I'm blocked off from power. The power to restore Carrie couldn't flow because Carrie was stuck in a framework of her own unconscious making. It was taught to her, as Lee was saying, it was taught to her at a very early age, just like we're all taught. We were laughing a little bit earlier in the class about how all the little boys all across the South, especially here in Texas, it's really true, are being taught about the virtues of football, right? And it's like gold standard stuff, right? And I'm an Oklahoma Sooners fan. I'm sorry, I get that, but I grew up in Oklahoma. I get Boomer Sooner. I get the value of, I get it. I also know that today, half of the people in Texas are living disappointed days because their expectations got poked yesterday because their team lost. Might ruin their whole week. This stuff is deeply embedded in us, and it's going to take some spiritual effort to get at it. So where does this take us to? Where does this take us to? Well, what it says to us, and this is something we will work a little bit in the workshop this afternoon if you happen to be coming. It's also something you can find with some of my resources on the web. Somebody came up, Jackie, I think, came up and said, there's a whole bunch of you out there. And I go, I know, it's pretty cool for a guy who's trying to get over self-importance to find out he's like all over the web. We get put in the damnedest places, don't we? So what we do, my language for this is we engage the darkness. We lean into the tender spots. And you'll know the tender spots because as soon as you think of those settings, you will feel it in your body because you got a divine design that is set to teach you what you need to know if you will turn toward it rather than avoid it. And let me be clear, some large percentage of you are going, I don't think this is a good idea at all. I'm planning, it's like, no, I want to dance, baby. I want to dance because it feels good. I totally understand that. I'm deeply empathetic because I have a long history of avoiding my own dark spots. I will also tell you personal story, simply, I would not trade that dark work for anything. I am this guy, not because I sought to become a better guy, but because the stuff that blocked this from showing up has against my will been dealt with. Alcoholism cornered me, 2 divorces cornered me, difficulties with my children cornered me, losing a career cornered me over and over and over again. The vicissitudes of life have been my teachers. And for reasons I cannot explain, I have had teachers who said, okay, let's don't run from this stuff. Let's turn into it. Let's see what it has to teach you. And my visceral reaction? No, there's football on. I got some football to watch. I got a date to think about. Except what happened in that corner too was I have a long succession of trying to figure out how to find a woman that works with, but as long as you're bringing a devastated consciousness with you, you just can't find them. It's not that they aren't out there, they tell me. So what I'm telling you is if you're stuck, my simple language, if you're stuck, you're not bad, you're not wrong, there's nothing wrong with the design of you. You're blocked off. You're innocent. It's not your fault. You don't know how to get unblocked because you don't even know how you're blocked. It's true of all of us in varying ways. It never stops. It's an upward spiral. Just when you think you've achieved, it's like, okay, let's deal with the next block. Okay, so let's talk about Groundhog Day. Anybody here not seen Groundhog Day, the movie with Bill Murray? Anybody not seen that movie? Oh, you've not seen that movie. 2 of you haven't seen the movie. Okay, shorts, 3 of you. Okay, Bill Murray plays a guy named Phil Collins, and it is the story of him recycling a day endlessly because he just can't stop being a jerk. He tries to kill himself to get out of it. He tries to kill a groundhog to get out of it. He tries every imaginable thing, and day after day after day after day, it's a mess. And a Buddhist friend of mine said, some Buddhist had gone back and assessed this and said, what we see is the evolution in short order, a 2-hour movie of 80,000 lifetimes for Phil Collins to finally learn how to not be a jerk. Which sounds like a long time, and you know what? Yeah, that's a long time. But what happened was he kept being taught by life, and eventually he went from being resistant to the teaching to being receptive to the teaching. As he moved down that continuum, as he stopped avoiding the lessons, he became clarified. As the darkness was dealt with, the light came through. I want to repeat that. You don't have to find the light. The light is waiting for the way to be made for it. It is the design. Just like sunlight fills up shadow. Just like that. Inside of us. So wherever you are stuck, it is the universe or the divine or your highest self or the Tao, whatever your frame of reference is, calling to you and saying, are you ready? Do you really want to get done with this? Would you like a repeat performance? Or, as the Course in Miracles, some of you probably know, would you like to choose again? And as soon as we're ready to say yes, because we're cornered, because we've exhausted every other strategy and those things aren't working, at that moment, things begin to move. And if you doubt that, I share your skepticism. I have been taught over and over again. So I think the question for you, and for me, always, is are you actually ready for the light to find you? Are you ready enough to be willing to look for the darkness that needs to be addressed so that something new can take place? And if your answer is, I'm not ready, I understand. But I want you to keep asking yourself that question, because if Phil Collins was right, resistance gives you 80,000 opportunities to practice. You get to choose. I'm delighted to be here with you.
I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask that you go to our website, agapecsl.com. Once there, click on the donate button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. Or if you would like, text your gift by simply dialing 972-532-6976. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to you in the world. I would ask that if you like this message, to please subscribe to my YouTube channel under my name, Lee Wolak. Again, I want to thank you for joining me in the Agape community as we learn how to better self-love through conscious living.